My name is Bill, a 31-year-old working mom. I live with my husband Davey, who's also 31 and holds a regular job, and our 5-year-old daughter Lenny, who's recently turned into quite the chatterbox. We're just an average family, neither rich nor poor, and we get along great. But soon, our peaceful home was about to be disrupted. The storm approaching our home was none other than my mother-in-law. Davey's father had passed away, and his mother lived alone. When we got married, Davey and I had decided not to live with her. It just seemed simpler that way. Davey, being her only child born later in her life, had been married to me for 5 years. His mother-in-law was now getting older, and living alone at her age could be tough and even dangerous. Davey would visit her when he could, but it seemed she was struggling. Seeing my husband trying so hard on his own, I made a decision. If Davey was doing his best, how could I not support him as his wife? So, I gathered my courage and suggested to Davey that we should all live together. He looked surprised and asked, "Are you sure?" Truthfully, I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I felt something needed to change. Balancing housework, childcare, and my part-time job was already a challenge, and if anything happened to mother-in-law, Davey would be the one to handle it. After discussing these important matters, we began living together. On a spring day with cherry blossoms falling, mother-in-law arrived at our home with tears in her eyes. I had thought living with such a humble woman would be smooth sailing, but I was mistaken. Initially reserved, as days passed, her true colors began to show. She started to torment me. "Bill, this dish is too salty. Can you make it lighter?" When I did, she'd criticize, "Why is it so bland? Are you mocking the elderly? How rude." And that was just the beginning. "Please hand wash all my clothes. They'll get ruined in the machine. They're all expensive, you know," she demanded. When I suggested dry cleaning, she retorted, "That's wasteful. You've lived comfortably thanks to my son, so stop wasting money and start saving." Clearly, she was just trying to annoy me. And that was just the beginner's level. Intermediate level torment went like this. "Bill, are you wearing makeup? It won't help. You're too plain." She'd comment on my appearance despite spending over 2 hours on her own makeup each morning, looking like a different person without it. I respect her desire to look beautiful, but isn't her foundation a bit too pale? I think to myself. What was worse, she threw away my precious makeup set. Nonchalantly, she said, "Makeup won't help you. It's a waste of money. Live without it. I have the most thoughtful family member. You should be grateful." This relentless torment only occurred when we were alone, always waiting for moments when my husband was away and our daughter was at kindergarten. I didn't want to speak negatively about her to my husband, since she's his mother, but I wished he would listen. After much consideration, I hinted at my frustrations, but it seemed to have little effect. "I'll talk to Mom," he said, attempting to address the situation. However, mother-in-law would cry, claiming I was making things up. At one point, he even accused me of trying to deceive him. Feeling increasingly powerless, I remembered the saying, "Seeing is believing." Deciding to secretly record my interactions with my mother-in-law, I carefully placed the camera. As I pondered this, the torment from my mother-in-law escalated to an advanced level. We had moved in with her in spring, and as summer faded into autumn, one winter day arrived. My husband was away on a business trip, and our daughter was staying with my parents. It was snowing heavily outside. Normally, I would bike to my part-time job, but due to the weather, I walked and returned in the evening. Upon arriving home, I usually cleaned, did laundry, and prepared dinner. However, on this cold winter night with heavy snowfall, hand-washing delicate laundry wasn't ideal. Nevertheless, mother-in-law cheerfully handed me her laundry. "Here's today's laundry. They're delicate, so be sure to hand-wash them," she emphasized, knowing it would irritate me. "I'll wash them with warm water," I started. "No, you can't. The colors will fade and it'll damage them." "Absolutely wash them with cold water," she insisted. Frustrated by her unreasonable demand, I snapped, "This is ridiculous. Why should I hand wash with cold water on such a cold day? If they're that precious, wash them yourself. How dare you expect me to wash with cold water on a day like this?" Mother-in-law stared at me, her face reddening with anger, but I didn't back down. "Why don't you go outside, mother-in-law? You've been indoors all day and probably don't realize how cold and snowy it is. How dare you suggest sending an elderly woman out in this cold?" she retorted. "What kind of daughter-in-law are you? What kind of mother-in-law asks for cold hand washing on a day like this?" I was ready to confront her fully. I feel bad for my husband, but if we're going to live together, I can't always play the good daughter-in-law, I thought to myself, glaring back at her. Unexpectedly, mother-in-law grabbed my hand, and before I could react, she pushed me out the front door. As I stood shocked, she locked the door behind me. "You're not the kind of daughter-in-law I want. Get out. This is my house. You should be the one leaving," she shouted through the door, ignoring my protests. No matter how much I banged on the door, but there was no response. I was in a bind. I wasn't wearing a coat and didn't have my house keys. Luckily, I had my cell phone in my pocket. I tried calling the house, and I could hear the ringtone from the other side of the door, but mother-in-law didn't answer. With no other choice, I called my husband, who was supposed to return from his business trip that day, but he didn't pick up. I sent him a message. "Mother-in-law locked me out. It's snowing heavily and I'm freezing. I'm heading to the nearby grocery store for shelter. Please get in touch ASAP." I started my trek to the grocery store. I briefly considered seeking help at a police box, but it was far from here, and with the heavy snow, it would take even longer. The grocery store seemed like the safest option. I hugged myself, trying to stay warm. My breath was visible in the cold, and the snow showed no signs of stopping. The accumulation was making the streets increasingly deserted. Cars, bikes, and pedestrians were nowhere to be seen. After what felt like a long journey, I finally reached the grocery store, only to find a sign saying it was closed due to heavy snow. Disheartened, I realized my only option now was the police box. I wondered how long it would take to walk there in the snow. Feeling increasingly desperate, I pressed on, but I could no longer feel my fingers or toes. Checking the time on my phone, an hour had passed since I was locked out. I tried calling home again, but mother-in-law still didn't answer. As I walked through the transformed cityscape, heading for the police box, I suddenly heard a cry for help. Help! I stopped in my tracks. I was near a bridge over a river. I strained my ears and heard it again. "Help me!" Hurrying towards the sound, I looked down from the bridge. There, in the not-so-deep river, was a woman who had fallen and was calling for assistance. I rushed down the river bank to her. The icy water stung my feet, and the cold was so intense it felt painful, but I managed to reach her. "Are you okay?" "I can't move, it's so cold," she replied weakly. "Hang in there," I reassured her, trying to keep calm despite the freezing conditions. The arrival of help seemed to relax her momentarily. She leaned against me and then suddenly lost consciousness. "What do I do? This is bad," I muttered to myself. I couldn't feel my hands or feet properly, and they wouldn't move as I wanted them to. "Someone help!" I shouted desperately, but my cries echoed in vain. I thought it was all over. Then I heard a man's voice. "Hey, are you okay?" My husband's face came into view, rushing towards me with a panicked expression. I blacked out. When I woke up, I found myself staring at a white ceiling. "Bill, are you awake?" my husband asked, looking down at me with concern. I realized I was in a hospital. Apparently, he had pulled both the lady and me out of the river and called an ambulance. It had happened yesterday, and I had been asleep ever since. "How was your trip?" I managed to ask. "It went well. I couldn't answer when you called because I was on the bus. I tried calling back when I got to the bus stop, but you didn't pick up. There were no taxis running, so I ran home. I just happened to see you going into the river. What luck. I thought you had jumped in, but it seems it was the lady." According to my husband, the lady that tried to help had jumped into the river in despair. The cold water had shocked her back to reality, and she attempted to get out but couldn't move due to the cold. If we had found her any later, it might have been too late. "So, the lady was okay?" I asked, feeling relieved. "Yes," he nodded. "You should rest. You must be exhausted." Comforted by my husband's words, I drifted off to sleep. All the while, my anger towards mother-in-law simmered. A few days passed in the hospital, and I was back to my old self. Standing in front of my home after so long, I froze. Mother-in-law hadn't visited me once while I was hospitalized. Of course, there was no apology. She had locked me out on a snowy night, nearly causing my death. Honestly, I couldn't bear to live with her any longer. Feeling dejected, I opened the front door and stepped outside. To my surprise, mother-in-law was there, deeply apologizing. "Belle, I'm so sorry," she said earnestly. "What's going on, mother-in-law?" I was taken aback by her unexpected apology. "I never imagined something like that would happen. I truly regret locking you out. Please forgive me," she pleaded. I was speechless. This was truly unexpected, mother-in-law continued. I never thought I would say this, but I'm sorry. Suspicious thoughts raced through my mind. Mother-in-law, who had always been aggressive towards me, who had locked me out in the snow. Could this be genuine? What will you do if I don't forgive you? I asked, narrowing my eyes at her. Mother-in-law's hand twitched slightly. I was freezing out there, you know. If my husband hadn't come, who knows what would have happened? Anyone would know what happens if you lock someone out in a snowstorm. If you didn't, does that mean you're not normal? I added sarcastically. Mother-in-law's face turned bright red. What did you just say? You think you can take advantage when someone's being nice? Don't get too cocky. My son said he'd end our living arrangement if I didn't apologize, so I did it. Now that I've apologized, let's forget about the whole locking out incident. Now get back to your chores, she said, her tone shifting abruptly. She had taken the bait so easily. My suspicions only deepened. I smirked, seeing right through mother-in-law's facade. Her remorse was all a lie. People don't change that easily, especially not someone like her. But just as I suspected, she began her antics again. Make sure you hand wash my clothes with warm water, she insisted. Are you still on about that? I retorted, exasperated by her ongoing demands. Only cook what I like. If it's not tasty, I'll throw it away. This is hopeless, absolutely hopeless, I muttered to myself, feeling resigned. She's beyond redemption. I sighed heavily and turned around. Saying all this, my husband, who had been standing nearby out of mother-in-law's sight, spoke up. Davy, her beloved son. What about work? Mother-in-law noticed him and turned towards him. I took the day off to be with Bill, he explained calmly. But Mom, you hadn't changed at all. Davy continued firmly. No, I was just joking, mother-in-law hastily interjected, trying to backtrack. It's not funny at all, Davy said sternly. I told you to genuinely apologize to Belle and never do such things again. But I did apologize, mother-in-law insisted defensively. You were about to revert to your mean self. That was just a joke, Davy countered. That's why it's not funny. I had warned my husband to keep his distance, but mother-in-law's reaction was as expected, if not more dramatic. She desperately tried to justify herself, but I couldn't help laughing. Belle, what's so funny? Mother-in-law asked, puzzled by my reaction. On the other hand, Mom, I'm talking now. Listen to me, Davy asserted calmly. I'm sorry. Even mother-in-law couldn't ignore her beloved son's words. Tearfully she listened as he continued his lecture. Why would you be mean to Belle when she agreed to live with us out of concern for you? I might have gone a bit overboard earlier, but I've never harassed her. I commented on the food's taste, but I just wanted her to know my preferences. I had asked for my clothes to be dry cleaned, but Belle insisted it was a waste and would hand wash them instead. Mother-in-law continued to complain, adding that Belle had thrown away her cosmetics right in front of her. She seemed intent on shifting blame away from herself. Unable to tolerate her denial any longer, I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Today's laundry, it's expensive, so definitely hand wash it. Mother-in-law's voice echoed clearly through the room. She screamed and tried to grab my phone, but I dodged her and continued playing. Definitely wash it with water. You're not the kind of daughter-in-law I want. Get out. The sound of her dragging me out and slamming the door, ignoring my pleas, was all recorded. Every violent action she had taken that day was captured on my phone. I had been secretly recording our conversations for some time now, ensuring I had evidence whenever I interacted with her. Any rebuttal? My husband asked calmly, confronting his mother. Mother-in-law was left speechless, unable to defend herself. Is there anything else to say? I intervened. Yes, this is the end. You've trampled all my feelings of wanting to care for you. I want you to leave. I'm cutting ties. You can live on your own. We won't contact you again. Even if you reach out, we'll ignore it and won't meet. You sold the family home, right? You should have all that money, plus with your pension, you should be fine. We won't help. But wait, Davy. Are you abandoning me? Betraying your only family? Mother-in-law pleaded desperately. You're the one who betrayed us. My husband's voice was firm, leaving mother-in-law sitting there, speechless and defeated. The only sound in the room was the dripping of melted snow from the roof. From that moment on, things moved swiftly. While mother-in-law sat there, lifeless, my husband and I packed her belongings. Her hometown was a 2-hour train ride from our place. She had distant relatives there, but she had been estranged from them for so long that no one would probably care now. She rarely went out when she lived with us, so she likely didn't have any friends. But now, it didn't matter. Bye, Grandma. My daughter waved at mother-in-law, her cheerful gesture devoid of any sadness. Finally, mother-in-law broke down into tears as the taxi carrying her drove off, leaving behind her sobs. I felt nothing as I watched her leave. It was her own doing. With that thought in mind, I entered our home, feeling refreshed. Time passed, and rumor said mother-in-law lived alone in an apartment. We still received calls from her, so she must be alive, but we never met or spoke to her, just as we promised. She would probably live a lonely life, having destroyed the happiness she could have had. While listening to the washing machine, I served tea to an unexpected guest, an elderly woman, the very same lady I had saved on that snowy day. She had been living a lonely life filled with despair, but the cold river water that day had made her want to live a bit longer. My son offered to live with me. That's wonderful. His wife is lovely, she shared, but I didn't want to be a burden, so I decided to move nearby instead. That's nice. I've been lonely since my husband passed away. I thought life had nothing good left, but I was wrong. I replied warmly. I'm glad you realized that. As long as I'm alive, there's hope. Thank you for saving me that day, she said with a grateful smile. I smiled back at her, seeing a lady who had lived her life with determination and had now found happiness. Mother-in-law, on the other hand, had ruined her chance to live with her son and his family. There are so many ways to grow old, and everyone's path is different. Our own attitudes shape whether our later years are happy or sad. Seeing these two elderly women, I had a clearer idea of the kind of future I wanted to ensure. A happy future, protecting the peaceful days I have now. I reminded myself of the path I should take. Protecting your daughter is our priority. One afternoon, a sudden call from the police jolted me. Why would they be calling me? What on earth happened? As I listened, shock coursed through me at their words. What do you mean? It turned out they had found my 4-year-old daughter alone and had taken her into their care. But she was supposed to be at the amusement park with my husband. Little did I know, this call would mark a significant turning point in our lives. I'm Karen, 30 years old, juggling work from home while raising my daughter. 5 years ago, I married my college classmate Andrew, and together we have a 4-year-old daughter named Jennifer. My husband is incredibly hands-on with childcare, often taking our daughter out on his days off. He's also on the cusp of a big promotion, so life has been quite rosy for us, thanks to him and our delightful daughter. That was until I received that fateful call. Today, we're going to the amusement park, Jennifer had exclaimed with excitement that Saturday. My husband, off work, had taken her, though I was meant to join. A last-minute work task foiled my plans. We're off. Have a great time, I called after them, watching as they held hands and headed to the car. All right, time to nail work today. It's going to be a good day, I murmured to myself as I retreated to my home office. 2 hours later, as I was about to take a short break, I noticed my phone ringing. Since it was lunchtime, I'd assumed it was my husband. However, the caller ID displayed an unknown number, leaving me on edge. Answering cautiously, I was greeted by the police, informing me they had found my daughter alone. But there was no way she'd be alone. She was supposed to be at the amusement park with my husband. Initially, I thought it was a prank. I decided to double-check with my husband. Hello, there's something I'd like to ask you, I began. What's up? He replied casually. Where are you and Jennifer right now? I inquired, my concern growing. We're at the amusement park, my husband answered, still nonchalant. My heart raced as I struggled to process his words. The police just called me, saying they found Jennifer. What's going on? What? Well, she's laughing next to me, he replied, sounding slightly unsettled. As long as you're together, that's fine, I said, trying to reassure myself. Can you put Jennifer on? No, she says she's too embarrassed, my husband responded. But she loves playing phone games and calling us when we're out. There's no way she'd be embarrassed, I countered, feeling my trust in my husband waver. Are you sure? It sounds like something Jennifer would do. Look, maybe Jennifer is tired too. Can we drop it now? My husband's eagerness to end the conversation only fueled my suspicion. Suddenly, I noticed something off. Wait, it's unusually quiet. There's no sound of laughter or amusement park rides in the background. I pointed out, my apprehension deepening. He claims they're at the amusement park, but could that be true? I'll see you at home then, I said, unable to shake the feeling of unease. With that, he hung up. As I pondered my husband's odd behavior and the unsettling silence, a nagging sense that something wasn't right consumed me. I realized I hadn't checked the GPS on my daughter's phone amidst the chaos of the police call. But it shows they're at the amusement park, I murmured to myself, surprised by the confirmation. The GPS confirmed they were indeed where they were supposed to be. However, the call from the police still left me uneasy. Worried yet suspicious, I decided to head to the amusement park. When I arrived at the Lost and Found Center, there she was, my daughter, chatting happily with a police officer. But as soon as she spotted me, tears streamed down her face. Dad said he'd wait for me on a bench and that I could go on any ride I wanted. I was playing, and then when I looked around, he was nowhere to be found, she sobbed. Concern gnawed at me as I listened to her story. I asked the staff for details. They had found my daughter wandering alone in the park. Despite several announcements calling for her guardians, no one showed up, prompting them to contact the police. Thankfully, she had a tag with her address and my contact details, allowing them to reach me quickly. Where could he be? What's he doing? My husband wasn't the type to abandon our 4-year-old daughter like this. Could he be in some sort of trouble? I shook off the unsettling thoughts as I focused on comforting my daughter. Mom, I took lots of pictures, she said, handing me her toy camera, a special gift from her grandfather. Even though it's just a toy, it can take real photos. Curious, I turned it on and scrolled through the pictures. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered under my breath as I came across a photo of my husband hugging an unfamiliar woman. My heart sank as more similar photos appeared, making me feel sick to my stomach. Jennifer, who is this woman? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She's a friend of Dad's, Jennifer replied innocently, but her words felt like a punch to the gut. Dark memories flooded back. My husband had cheated on me once before, 5 years ago when I was pregnant. We had reconciled then because of our impending child, but now he was doing it again, and using our daughter to cover it up. He probably left her here to be with his mistress. Do you know where Dad went, Jennifer? I asked, my voice trembling. She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes as she recounted how he had forcefully pushed her away earlier, telling her she was big enough to play by herself. I'm so sorry you had to go through this, sweetie, I whispered, taking her hand as we headed home. Late that night, my husband rushed through the door, looking panicked. Where have you been, and what have you been doing? I demanded, my anger barely contained. He picked up on the tension in my voice, looking tense himself. Actually, Jennifer went missing, he stammered. You said she was fine on the phone. Why did you lie? I pressed. I didn't lie, he insisted, but his words rang hollow in the air. I never imagined it would take this long to find her. It's been over 6 hours since that phone call. He's probably been out with his mistress all this time. It's clear he's lying. Don't you think it's odd you didn't notice the park announcement? I confronted him. How do you know about that? He asked, looking uncomfortable. The police called me when I went to pick up Jennifer at the amusement park. The staff told me, I replied, watching his silence confirm my suspicions. He wasn't there, leaving our daughter stranded at an amusement park to be with his mistress. It's unforgivable. I've made up my mind to get back at him, I declared firmly. Fine, just don't do it again, he said, visibly relieved. Okay, I replied, deciding to let him think he's off the hook for now. Meanwhile, I've been up to something. A month later, I found myself in Los Angeles, not for vacation or work, but to catch my husband red-handed with his mistress. Having a good time on your trip with your mistress? I confronted them as they walked hand in hand. They both turned around, their faces filled with shock. You can't talk your way out of this, Karen. What are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to be on a business trip today? He stuttered. That's not it. She's a colleague from work, he tried to explain. Oh, really? I called your office. They confirmed you took the day off? I countered, watching him grow increasingly rattled, his eyes darting around as if seeking a way out of his own lie. How did you even find out I was here? He finally asked. Remember the GPS on Jennifer's phone? I put it in your car, I replied, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and betrayal. I showed him my phone screen, displaying the location of a car parked nearby. Using a hidden camera is so underhanded. Who's the underhanded one here? The only reason you'd be worried is if you had something to hide, I accused, my frustration evident. Or is this you finally admitting it? I continued, my voice trembling with anger. That's not it, he retorted, his fury palpable. He cheats and yet blames me, I thought, rendered momentarily speechless by his audacity. Do you even have proof that I cheated? He challenged, his tone dripping with disdain. Well, about that, I trailed off before shoving a photo in his face. What is this? Look familiar, I demanded, my voice rising. This is from when we went to the amusement park. But how do you have this picture? You were supposed to be working, he sputtered, his disbelief evident. Jennifer took it. Toy camera actually works, you know, I replied, my frustration mounting. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, his expression shifting from disbelief to denial. This isn't even me, he insisted, attempting to dismiss the evidence. To counter his attempt to weasel out, I handed him a large number of photos. There were so many of them that they seemed to overflow from his hands. I'll admit the toy camera doesn't take the clearest photos, so I took these myself to make sure, I explained, watching his face pale as he saw the photos clearly showing him with his lover. How could you be all lovey-dovey with her right in front of our daughter? You're despicable, I accused, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and betrayal. In a desperate attempt to erase the evidence, he began tearing up the photos. But I had anticipated his move. Too bad these are all copies, I declared triumphantly, watching his face fall as the realization sank in. I've got the original stored safely, I declared, my anger palpable as I glared at him. He looked defeated, but I decided to deal another blow. You've got a big promotion coming up at work, don't you? I asked pointedly. What's your point? He replied, his voice strained. How do you think spreading these photos would affect that? I pressed. His face gradually turned paler as he realized the implications. His company values character when considering promotions. If word got out about the affair, it could ruin his chances. Please don't do this. Do you really think I'll forgive you now? I've been a good husband all this time, haven't I? He pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. A good husband wouldn't leave his daughter at an amusement park, I retorted loudly, watching him visibly shrink back. But I've been taking our daughter out every week lately, haven't I? He countered weakly. That was just to keep me off your scent about your affair, wasn't it? I shot back, my voice dripping with accusation. I'm really sorry. Just please don't tell my work, he begged, his almost tearful face failing to elicit any sympathy from me. Do you remember when you cheated on me 5 years ago while I was pregnant? I continued, watching his face tense and sweat form on his forehead. I haven't forgotten the agreement we signed. His eyes widened in realization. No, this isn't what it looks like. It's not an affair, he stammered, but his words fell flat. Then what is it? I demanded, my voice cold and unyielding. He fell silent, starting to cry, pathetic. Then go ahead and sign this, I said, thrusting divorce papers towards him. No, I don't want to break up. Who will take care of things at home if you're gone? He protested weakly. Staying together now is impossible, I stated firmly. I promise no more affairs, he screamed, his eyes bloodshot with tears, but his words didn't reach my heart. I'm not angry about the affair anymore, I replied calmly. What, so you're forgiving me? He asked hopefully. No, I replied firmly. What I'm angry about is you putting our daughter in danger. My husband fell silent, tears streaming down his face. And another thing, I continued, my voice steady, you don't have a place in anyone's life anymore. What do you mean? He asked, confusion evident in his voice. While you were gone, I told your parents, your coworkers, and everyone in your usual hangouts about what you've done. Everyone knows now, I explained. Hearing this, my husband buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed with despair. I don't even want to see your face, so make sure you fill this out, I said, handing him divorce papers. My husband looked up at me, his face a mess of tears and snot, resembling a child. I left him there and walked away. A month later, the news reached his company, and they revoked his promotion because of the agreement we had. He had to give up his assets with an additional $220,000 in damages and $400 a month in child support. He's barely making ends meet now, having to change jobs to a company with a terrible work environment just to earn a higher salary. He's working nonstop. Meanwhile, I've moved back to my parents' home with our daughter, doing my best as a single mom. Next year, my daughter will start preschool, and I'm looking forward to seeing her grow anew. Our establishment caters exclusively to celebrities. If you're not affluent, we kindly ask that you refrain from visiting. Please vacate the premises, the manager asserted with little emotion. The following day, I couldn't shake the lingering sense of prejudice toward appearances prevalent in five-star accommodations. Yet the manager remained oblivious. He failed to grasp the influence wielded by my in-laws and the discontent he would face in the days to come. I'm Maria, 32, a homemaker without children. Stephen, my husband, and I crossed paths during my part-time stint at a supermarket. His serene and refined demeanor convinced me of his inherent decency early in our courtship. However, my astonishment peaked during a visit to his parents' abode for wedding discussions. The residence resembled more of a sprawling campus than a home, complete with imposing gates and towering walls that concealed its entirety from view. Beyond the gate, an unexpected spectacle greeted me. At the far end of the lengthy stone pathway stood a breathtaking country estate, reminiscent of a lavish villa. A meticulously maintained garden sprawled beside the grand structure, suggesting the handiwork of a skilled gardener. My eyes widened further as I caught sight of what seemed to be a pristine swimming pool and tennis courts nestled beyond. A wave of disbelief washed over me as I questioned the purpose of my visit. Stephen's dual role as a college student and part-time convenience store worker was indeed remarkable. How he managed such a balancing act puzzled me. According to Stephen, his family tree boasted a lineage of corporate titans, his father, mother, sister, and himself all holding esteemed positions as presidents of top companies. Unlike some celebrities who inherit family enterprises, Stephen's family forged their own paths as accomplished entrepreneurs. Following suit, Stephen treated the same path, utilizing his part-time earnings to cover tuition costs and kickstarting his own entrepreneurial venture. It was through this unique circumstance that our paths crossed, and now he tirelessly endeavors to expand his fledgling business. In my family, my father holds a regular job at a company, my mother is a homemaker, and my brother follows suit with his own corporate career. Doubts crept in, making me ponder whether I could truly fit into Stephen's world as his wife. However, Stephen remained unperturbed. What drew me to you was your warmth and joy. You're the one I envisioned sharing my life with, he reassured me. I made the decision to place my trust in Stephen and stand by his side, yet concerns loomed regarding my prospective in-laws. Would they view me, a commoner, as an adequate match for their son? Anxiety gnawed at my heart, fearing I might disappoint them. However, upon meeting Stephen's family, my apprehensions melted away. They embraced me with genuine warmth and hospitality, expressing delight that Stephen had finally brought a woman home. My father-in-law, in particular, seemed to take a liking to me. Maria, you possess a rare beauty, inside and out. Your upbringing shines through in your demeanor. Stephen's choice is impeccable, my mother-in-law praised. Both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law exuded warmth and kindness, and by the time our visit concluded, we had formed a genuine bond, evolving into good friends. Likewise, my own parents found solace in Stephen's gentle and composed nature, swiftly granting their blessing for our union. With their approval secured, our marriage proceeded seamlessly. As Stephen embarked on his entrepreneurial journey, he expressed his desire for me to leave my job and embrace the role of a full-time homemaker to support him. We settled into an apartment close to my in-laws' residence, relishing the early days of our marriage. Occasionally, we'd gather for dinner parties and barbecues at my in-laws, who, despite their hectic schedules, embrace Annie, our live-in nanny, as part of the family. Witnessing their genuine kindness left a lasting impression on me, reassuring me that I could be myself without feeling intimidated by their celebrity status. As 3 months elapsed since our nuptials, we decided to host a grand celebration for my father-in-law's 60th birthday. Wanting to reciprocate the care and hospitality shown to us during our wedding, Stephen and I took charge of arranging the festivities. With Stephen preoccupied with work, the responsibility fell on my shoulders, a decision we reached after discussing it together. Your father adores you, Maria, so you have the freedom to choose. I believe he'll be happy anywhere and with anything, Stephen assured me. Accepting that I had the liberty to make my own decisions proved to be the most challenging aspect. Seeking guidance, I confided in a friend who suggested opting for a top-tier hotel, especially since my father held such esteemed status. Following her advice, I discovered a luxurious 5-star hotel conveniently located near my parents' residence. Despite my lack of experience with upscale accommodations, I assumed it would meet the standards. Nevertheless, I resolved to visit and judge for myself. I opted to visit the hotel first, feeling a bit apprehensive about going alone. To ease my nerves, I invited my best friend from high school to join me. Upon making a reservation for lunch, I was immediately struck by the restaurant's impeccable and gracious service. Clear signs of a five-star establishment, I thought. Dressed in a smart and elegant ensemble, a white blouse paired with a sleek black skirt and pumps, I felt ready to step into the realm of luxury. My friend, too, looked lovely in her floral dress and stylish heeled boots. As we made our way to the hotel, excitement bubbled within me, akin to the anticipation of embarking on a thrilling journey. Little did I know, the experience awaiting us would exceed all expectations. I drove to the hotel in my trusty car, a faithful companion since my single days, and followed the directions to the parking lot situated at the roundabout near the entrance. The attendant who guided me was exceptionally courteous and helpful. However, as I stepped into the lobby, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. A sharply dressed man caught my attention. His stern gaze seemed to pierce through me. Though he bore the demeanor of a hotel staff member, neither my friend nor I recognized him. His impeccable suit and poised posture exuded an air of authority. I couldn't fathom why he was scrutinizing us so intently. Descending into the underground parking lot, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of self-consciousness as my modest car stood amidst the lineup of sleek black luxury vehicles. Observing some guests being chauffeured in with doors ceremoniously opened for them only added to my unease. Tempted to hail a cab, I hesitated, knowing it would only delay my arrival when I was already so close to home. As my friend and I entered the hotel, the individual who had been observing us approached. "You seem a bit out of place here. Can I be of assistance?" he asked, his tone polite yet carrying a hint of condescension that didn't sit well with me. "I have a lunch reservation here." "What do you mean by unsuitable for the hotel?" I questioned, feeling the surge of indignation. The taller man continued, his gaze directed down at me. "Your choice of vehicle and attire don't quite align with the usual clientele of this establishment," he remarked, punctuating his statement with a laugh. My cheeks flushed with embarrassment, appalled by his snobbish demeanor. Unable to meet his gaze, my friend averted her eyes. Despite feeling the sting of embarrassment, I refused to let it drive me away. Though typically reserved, I possess a resilient spirit, and I was determined to confront the individual responsible for these disparaging remarks. I needed to know who dared to speak about me in such a derogatory manner. "Are you a member of the hotel staff?" I inquired sharply, my eyes fixed on him. "I happen to be the manager of this establishment," came his haughty reply. Privately, I couldn't help but find his emphasis on the hotel's prestigious rating rather absurd, though I chose to keep this observation to myself. His response only served to aggravate me further. "Does this hotel judge its patrons based on their cars and appearance, adjusting its treatment accordingly?" I challenged, refusing to back down. The manager's disdainful sniff and snort in response only fueled my determination. "The clientele should align with the hotel's esteemed reputation. Maintaining that standard ensures guests feel comfortable and at ease," he asserted. His words grated on my nerves. "Are you implying that we're somehow tarnishing the reputation of your establishment?" I retorted, feeling my irritation mounting. The manager clicked his tongue disapprovingly. I couldn't help but feel sorry for my friend, who I had invited along. The thought of canceling our reservation and leaving crossed my mind. Just as I was considering our next move, an elderly hotel staff member approached me and politely inquired, "Ma'am?" Upon learning of my lunch reservation, he respectfully acknowledged the manager with a bow and said, "Allow me to escort you to the restaurant." With a sense of relief, I followed him to our destination, noticing the manager's lingering bitter glare. Unlike the manager's demeanor, the hotel employee who guided us was courteous and welcoming. "You've traveled quite a distance, and I apologize for any discomfort you may have experienced. We're renowned for our exquisite cuisine, and I trust you'll have a delightful stay," the young manager offered apologetically. I couldn't help but wonder how such a youthful figure found himself at the helm of such a prestigious establishment. He explained that the hotel's previous owner had retired, passing the reins to his younger brother, with his son assuming the role of manager. Despite his impressive academic background from a top-tier university, the manager lacked prior experience in hospitality and struggled to uphold the hotel's esteemed standards. It's disheartening to witness even long-standing patrons being overlooked and compelled to depart over minor matters, the elderly employee lamented solemnly. "I've dedicated my life to this hotel, only to find myself deemed expendable in its quest for rejuvenation. I'll be bidding farewell at the month's end. It seems the hotel no longer values the loyalty of its devoted staff, instrumental in achieving its coveted 5-star status. As the elderly hotelier had assured, the cuisine surpassed all expectations, leaving my palate thoroughly satisfied. The head chef, who greeted us personally, exuded skill and experience, his age mirroring that of the hotelier. Yet a nagging concern lingered: would he too fall victim to the hotel's restructuring? People find joy in satiation, I remarked to my best friend as we exited the restaurant, our faces radiant with contentment. Just as we prepared to depart, the manager approached us once more. "I eagerly anticipate your return to our restaurant," he remarked, his persistence unwavering. Though our decision to leave remained unchanged, the manager's resolve remained steadfast. "I'm sorry, but individuals like yourself detract from the dignity of this establishment. This is a hotel frequented by celebrities, not suitable for those of lesser means. Kindly vacate the premises immediately," the manager declared bluntly, leaving me too stunned to protest. Though the hotel itself was undeniably elegant, the manager's rudeness and discourtesy left a sour taste in my mouth, prompting me to reconsider hosting my father-in-law's birthday celebration there. Surely, there must be a more hospitable venue nearby. When I recounted the incident to my in-laws, they listened intently. However, upon learning the name of the hotel, they exchanged puzzled glances. "Why do we visit this hotel? I'm curious to experience such a renowned establishment," my father-in-law suggested. Much to my bewilderment, I couldn't comprehend his eagerness to return to a place where I had encountered such disrespect. "Let's dress casually," my father-in-law proposed, urging everyone to do the same. He instructed us to proceed ahead while he would join us later. From the moment we stepped into the roundabout, the manager's piercing gaze never wavered. The lobby was bustling with activity. Guests lounged on plush sofas or sipped coffee, creating an atmosphere akin to a bustling event venue. As we settled onto a sofa beneath a grand chandelier, awaiting my father-in-law's arrival, the manager stormed in, his expression thunderous. "You've returned, evidently without learning your lesson. You never seem to grasp it, do you? Arriving in a minivan, utterly disgraceful," he bellowed, his tone dripping with disdain. Undeterred by his haughty demeanor, I countered, "We're here to celebrate my father-in-law's birthday. I made a reservation, and there was no mention of vehicle type. What's the issue?" Unfazed, the manager continued his tirade. "Your attire screams unsophisticated. You belong in one of those seedy roadside inns," he spat, his words drawing shocked glances from the other guests. "This hotel should be open to everyone, shouldn't it? We're prepared to pay. It's absurd to judge guests based on arbitrary criteria. Treating guests this way is utterly appalling," I declared, garnering nods of agreement from those nearby. "The customer should always come first, shouldn't they? Selecting guests based on appearance is simply unacceptable." The manager, visibly flustered, flushed red and retorted, "We are a luxury establishment. We cater to celebrities. If you're not affluent, kindly depart." "In that case, let's all head home," my father-in-law suggested. His words prompted many in the lobby to rise and depart, murmuring their discontent. "I won't be returning, and I certainly won't recommend this place to anyone," they vowed as they attempted to leave, prompting a heated exchange with the rushing employees. In reality, the individuals in the lobby were all acquaintances of my father-in-law who had gathered at his behest. His slight delay was due to his efforts in rallying them together. My father-in-law had been a familiar face at the hotel since the days of its previous management. In the early years, he often dropped by in his work attire, yet he was captivated by the hotel's consistent dedication to treating every guest with the utmost respect. His company had a tradition of hosting extravagant parties at the venue annually, becoming deeply intertwined with its history. He introduced the hotel to his family, who also frequented its halls. Given their collective stature as company presidents, the frequency of these gatherings was notable. My mother-in-law utilized the hotel for client entertaining, while my sister-in-law conducted executive training sessions within its walls. Even my husband's company held celebratory events there, underscoring the significance of each family member's company to the hotel's success. Then, a voice broke the tension, begging for forgiveness. To our astonishment, it was none other than the hotel president, the manager's father, kneeling before us. The elderly hotelier, recognizing my father-in-law, had urgently contacted the president. With a profound apology, he chastised his son for his egregious behavior, compelling the manager to kneel alongside him in remorse. "I deeply regret the misunderstanding, sir. Had I known your esteemed position, the treatment would have been different. It was inappropriate to base service on financial status." The manager attempted to justify himself, but his excuses fell flat. "There's no need for apologies to me. It was my daughter-in-law who was mistreated by your manager, a woman as dear to me as my own daughter. Remember who the hotel truly serves. I have fond memories of your predecessor, but it's time to part ways," my father-in-law asserted firmly, signaling our departure from the five-star establishment. Leaving behind the pretentious atmosphere, we relocated to a beloved diner frequented by my family. With its cozy private rooms and welcoming ambience, the diner was the perfect setting to celebrate my father-in-law's milestone birthday. The delightful food and warm atmosphere brought joy to my in-laws, marking a memorable conclusion to the day. At my father-in-law's suggestion, we extended the celebration to include my parents, transforming the occasion into a lively and joyous affair. My husband and I gladly footed the bill for the party at the familiar diner. It was a modest expense for us, given the casual nature of the establishment. Once again, I reflected on our commitment to remain grounded, refusing to let wealth cloud our values or lead to misconceptions. As time passed, rumors circulated that the manager had been dismissed and demoted to the role of a cleaner. Although the specifics remained uncertain, it was clear that the hotel's reputation had suffered irreparable damage. 2 years later, the once illustrious establishment shuttered its doors for good, a cautionary tale of the consequences of arrogance and elitism. The next time I drove past the hotel, the sight was dismal. The glass windows shattered, furniture stacked haphazardly in front of the entrance, turning it into a desolate wasteland. The legacy of the hotel, once steeped in tradition, lay in ruins, all due to the actions of one misguided individual. Despite my father-in-law's humble upbringing, we share a strong bond, and I cherish the time spent with him, my husband, and the rest of my in-laws. As news of my pregnancy spreads, anticipation fills the air, with everyone eagerly awaiting the arrival of the newest addition to the family. I caught my husband in the act of cheating, an experience I never thought I'd have. Most people would likely confront their spouse upon discovering evidence of infidelity, but I stumbled upon the truth firsthand in a setting I never anticipated, surrounded by unsuspecting witnesses. Suspicions about their relationship had lingered in my mind, but nothing prepared me for witnessing my husband's betrayal so publicly. My name is Christina, a stay-at-home mom to a 6-year-old son. On the day of the incident, my husband had a rare day off, and we had plans for a family outing. However, when I awoke, he was already gone. A message informed me he was tending to his feverish sister, and with no one else home, he expected to return in the evening. As the message came through, a heavy sigh escaped my lips. I had promised my son a day of fun at the amusement park, and he had eagerly anticipated it since the day before. I knew my husband had been shouldering a significant workload lately, immersed in a major project for the past 6 months without respite. This day was meant to be a rare opportunity for our family to bond. Instead, he chose to attend to his sister's needs. She supposedly had a fiancé, rendering her capable of managing on her own. Yet my husband's penchant for playing caretaker to his sister prevailed. It wasn't the first time his sister's needs took precedence over our family plans. His fixation on his sister had always unsettled me. He once admitted that he was drawn to me because of my resemblance to her, coupled with my supposedly exceptional qualities. While I acknowledged his sister's beauty and kindness when I met her long ago, being likened to her always left me feeling uneasy. It seemed the highest compliment he could offer, but the underlying implications left me feeling uncomfortable. My husband used to express his desire for both a son and a daughter, often initiating intimacy. However, since the birth of our son, there's been a noticeable decline in our physical connection, to the point where it's non-existent now. Considering our youth and my husband's prior enjoyment of intimacy, suspicions arise that he may be seeking it elsewhere. Betrayal is one thing I could perhaps forgive, albeit reluctantly. But what troubles me more is his consistent absence, even on days off like today. Spending time with our child should be a natural inclination, yet he seems indifferent. Our son, deeply attached to his father, becomes distraught when he's absent. Despite ample opportunities, my husband fails to engage with our son, neglecting simple gestures like birthday gifts or attending school functions. Instead, he retreats to his room, engrossed in endless gaming sessions, disconnected from family life. If this continues, our once close father-son bond risks fading into unfamiliarity. I grew increasingly skeptical of my husband's claims about being engrossed in a major project, considering his prolonged absences from home. Seeking clarification, I reached out to a former classmate employed at the same company. "Is my husband truly buried in work as he claims?" I inquired, a hint of suspicion in my tone. My classmate chuckled before responding, "Absolutely not. If anything, your husband has earned a reputation as a window-side employee. He appears disinterested and clocks out on time every day." Confirmation of my suspicions sent a wave of realization crashing over me. It aligned perfectly with my observations. Despite purportedly leading a significant project, his modest salary and lack of exhaustion contradicted his narrative. Such inconsistencies only fueled my doubts about his fidelity. Frustration weighed heavily on me as I finished preparing breakfast. Glancing at the time, I furrowed my brow in concern. It was unusual for my son not to be up by 7 a.m., especially since he typically woke early. Now, it was already past that hour, and if we didn't hurry, he'd miss the nursery school bus. Hastily, I made my way to his room to rouse him. Entering his room, I found him still fast asleep. "It's morning, sweetheart. Time to wake up," I called out, expecting a swift response. Instead, all I heard was a strained groan. Alarmed, I reached out to touch his forehead and was met with intense heat. Anxiety surged through me as I gently shook his shoulder, urging him to wake. "Mama, I can't breathe," he murmured weakly, his words sending a chill down my spine. Panic threatened to consume me as thoughts raced through my mind. With news of an outbreak at the nursery school circulating, dread seized me. Could my son be afflicted too? Reports of children succumbing to the illness only heightened my fear, and I dreaded the possibility of losing him. In a frantic bid for help, I reached for my phone, dialing my husband's number repeatedly. Yet each attempt went unanswered, leaving me to grapple with fear and uncertainty alone. Without a moment to spare, I bypassed waiting for an email response and reached out to my mother for urgent first aid guidance. With her nursing expertise, she was my go-to expert in moments like these. Swiftly following her precise instructions, I fashioned an ice pack and took my son's temperature, finding it alarmingly high at over 102.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Without hesitation, I dialed for an ambulance and tended to my son, ensuring he stayed hydrated while awaiting medical assistance. Concerned about the potential for heat stroke, as my mother had cautioned, I acted swiftly to mitigate any further risks. As the ambulance arrived, I faced the sobering reality that I couldn't accompany my son due to infection precautions. Left with no alternative, I hailed a taxi and hurried to the hospital where he would be treated. Throughout the ordeal, I persisted in attempting to reach my husband, despite knowing the futility of my efforts. Dishearteningly, my attempts went unanswered, prompting me to leave a desperate message online, clinging to the hope that he might see it and respond if he possessed a shred of responsibility. Upon reaching the hospital, I anxiously awaited outside the emergency treatment room, fervently praying for my son's swift recovery. Memories of losing my father in a similar emergency room flooded my mind, igniting fears of losing my son as well. As I grappled with the possibility of another devastating loss, my mother, a steadfast source of support, offered reassurance, her words a comforting refrain amidst the turmoil. An hour later, relief washed over me as I received news of my son's rescue. However, medical advice dictated a week-long hospital stay for his recovery, prompting his transfer to a hospital room. Despite the harrowing ordeal, my husband remained absent, compounding my sense of isolation. Determined to provide for my son's needs, I returned home the following day to gather essentials and decided to bring him some fruit as a gesture of care. Wanting to express gratitude to the doctor who had aided us, I made a detour past the emergency room, only to find chaos unfolding within its confines. Sensing I might be in the way, I postponed my visit to the doctor, turning to head towards my son's room. It was then that I witnessed a startling sight. A man and a woman on a stretcher, their bodies entwined as if caught in a bizarre embrace. The scene hinted at a precarious situation, one where they appeared to be joined together, perhaps a consequence of a mishap during intimate moments. I navigated the chaotic scene, my mind filled with sympathy for those caught in such a vulnerable predicament. The embarrassment of being transported in such a manner must be excruciating, I mused, attempting to pass by discreetly. However, my thoughts were abruptly interrupted as my gaze locked with that of a familiar face. Under ordinary circumstances, the encounter might have been merely awkward. Yet for me, it was nothing short of shocking. My husband lay on the stretcher, his expression betraying surprise at our unexpected reunion. "What are you doing here?" I blurted out, astonishment coloring my voice. Caught off guard, my husband stammered, "Ah, well, I've caught my sister's cold," his words faltering in the face of my inquiry. Confusion clouded my mind as I grappled with the surreal coincidence of encountering my husband in the same emergency room where our son had been admitted just the day before. Questions swirled in my head as I watched him being transported, unclothed, alongside another woman. Who was she, and why were they together? Amidst my bewilderment, my gaze met the eyes of the woman accompanying my husband. Despite the chaos, a flicker of recognition sparked within me. Even in my state of disarray, I couldn't deny the truth staring back at me. This woman was my husband's mistress. As I glared at her, a familiar voice cut through the tumult, pulling me from my thoughts. "Why on earth is Christina here?" the voice exclaimed. Recognition dawned upon me. Of course, the woman beside my husband was none other than Brenna, his sister. Time seemed to stretch out endlessly as I processed the surreal unfolding of events. Suspicions of my husband's deceit had simmered within me, but I never anticipated this revelation. Even if he had come to check on our son, his entanglement with another woman, especially his own sister, was beyond comprehension. Despite the urge to confront them immediately, the sight of my husband and his sister being wheeled away on a stretcher forced me to restrain myself. I knew they couldn't evade scrutiny, so I resolved to address the situation later. Suppressing the surge of emotions, I redirected my focus to my son, the initial reason for my visit. With a heavy weight settling in my chest, I sought solace in his room, attempting to untangle the jumble of feelings swirling within me. When I checked my phone, it was flooded with messages from my husband, each one attempting to gloss over the situation. Notably absent was any mention of our son's hospitalization. Deciding to continue ignoring him, I waited patiently for another hour. Soon enough, the doctor who had tended to my son the previous day appeared. Their smile was reassuring as they delivered the news. "Your son is doing remarkably well. His recovery is progressing faster than anticipated. His fever has subsided and his condition has stabilized. Initially, we were concerned about the possibility of infection, but it seems he was suffering from heat stroke in addition to a cold." The doctor's praise for my actions brought a sense of validation, even though I knew much of it was owed to my mother's guidance. I made a mental note to express my gratitude to her, perhaps with a thoughtful gift of fancy meat next time. I offered a deep bow of gratitude to the compassionate doctor before me, though beneath my relief for my son's improving health, a storm of anger brewed within me. It was clear that I was about to confront a significant ordeal. As I struggled to contain my emotions, my son's innocent remark about my stern expression snapped me back to composure. I quickly donned a smile for his sake. "Mama's face is just pretending to be scary. I'm not scared," I reassured him before stepping away with a promise to return soon. Exiting the hospital, I braced myself for the impending conversation with my husband, who had bombarded me with over 100 missed calls. The moment he answered, a torrent of excuses spilled forth. "It wasn't what it looked like. There's an explanation," he insisted, attempting to justify his actions. His misplaced priorities only fueled my frustration. Shouldn't his foremost concern be our son's well-being? There's no way a man so absorbed in such a despicable act with his own sister, neglecting our son's well-being, could ever truly care, I muttered to myself, the bitterness evident in my voice. With a husband like him, I feared for our son's future. Recognizing the bleak reality of my husband's character, I made the difficult decision to divorce him. Despite the challenges ahead, I was determined to navigate them for the sake of my son. Turning to face him, I unleashed the pent-up anger that had been simmering within me. "So, while our son was suffering, you were preoccupied with that, weren't you? Indulging whenever you had a moment to spare, and with your own sister, no less." "It's utterly repulsive," I spat out at him. He stood speechless, unable to offer a defense. Pressing on, I delivered my final blow. "Oh, and just so you know, I've already informed your parents. I won't involve your company for now. It would be a shame if you couldn't meet your obligations for alimony and child support." Goodbye, I concluded, severing ties with my husband with those parting words. 3 days later, my son made a full recovery, surpassing all expectations. With the discharge process complete, I returned home, embracing my beloved son's restored health. Naturally, my husband was nowhere to be found. In the aftermath of the ordeal, my husband sought me out to offer his apologies in person. Yet, as he pleaded for forgiveness, I sullenly handed him the divorce papers I had already prepared and signed. This wasn't an isolated incident, I responded, my voice devoid of warmth. I know the truth now. Your sister confessed everything. I anticipated my husband's reluctance to accept the reality of our situation, knowing that our path to divorce wouldn't be easily agreed upon. To confront him and ensure his silence, I decided to approach his sister, who was complicit in the affair. Congratulations on your upcoming wedding ceremony with your boyfriend, I began, masking my disdain with forced politeness. Thank you. I was actually thinking of crafting a clever story to share the news. Would you like to hear it? She replied, oblivious to the gravity of the situation. Are you planning to disclose everything to everyone? I interjected, my tone sharpening. I want the truth to come out. It's time people see you for who you truly are, I retorted with a smirk, relishing the power of my revelation. Please, don't do this. It would destroy my life, she pleaded, a hint of desperation in her voice. Feigning contemplation, I maintained a composed smile as I proposed, I suppose I could keep this under wraps on one condition. How about you disclose every detail of your encounters with my husband? Then perhaps I'll consider staying silent, though rest assured, your brother will still feel the sting of betrayal. What say you? Without a moment's hesitation, my sister-in-law acquiesced, her desperation palpable. Please spare him the pain. I'll tell you everything, she confessed readily. Confronting my husband with the truth left him reeling, his beloved sister's betrayal cutting him to the core. Overwhelmed, he collapsed from the shock, only to awaken and promptly sign the divorce papers, burdened by the weight of his betrayal. Taking decisive action, I enlisted the aid of a lawyer to secure divorce, custody of our son, and the appropriate financial support. Though my husband initially balked at the demands, a whispered reminder of his potential exposure prompted his compliance. With a heavy heart, he departed the lawyer's office, resigned to the consequences of his actions. Following the revelation of the affair, word somehow reached my husband's workplace, leading to a stern rebuke from his superiors. A month later, he faced the harsh consequence of dismissal, forced to seek employment at a food factory. Now, tasked with adorning cakes with strawberries to fulfill his obligations for alimony and child support, he found himself ostracized among his co-workers, his past indiscretions a constant source of discomfort, fueled by incessant rumors, particularly among younger female colleagues. As for my husband's sister, despite my discretion in withholding the truth, the details of her involvement inevitably surfaced. Her engagement swiftly crumbled under the weight of suspicion when her boyfriend, echoing my own doubts, enlisted the services of a private investigator to uncover the truth. Following the shattered engagement, she found herself facing a hefty compensation demand, forcing her to seek employment at a nightclub to make ends meet. Recently, her ex-boyfriend, perhaps feeling a pang of remorse, handed her a compromising photo of their affair with a casual, "keep it for when you might need it." She couldn't help but marvel at his audacity as she stowed it away in her drawer, a potential leverage should her husband attempt any further indiscretions. In pursuit of a fresh start, she relocated to her parents' home, where she's rebuilding her life with their unwavering support, especially in raising her son. Despite their geographical distance, her parents eagerly offer assistance whenever needed, although she strives not to burden them excessively, reserving their help for times of genuine necessity. Since recovering from that severe fever, my son has enjoyed pristine health, almost as if the ordeal never occurred. Remarkably, he's received awards for perfect attendance 3 years running, seemingly oblivious to the absence of his biological father. Witnessing his contentment each day brings me unparalleled joy. On another note, our family has expanded with the addition of Angel, a charming white cat. Originally a frequent visitor to our yard, Angel quickly endeared himself to me. Reluctant to bid him farewell upon moving, I brought him along to my parents' home. Now, he's formed a close bond with them, becoming an integral part of our family alongside my son. As I sit on the porch, gently stroking Angel's fur, I find solace in the warmth of family and companionship. Watching my son thrive in the loving embrace of my parents, with Angel by our side, fills me with a profound sense of contentment and gratitude for the life we've built together.